Happy Halloween, listeners! Considering the occasion, we wanted to re-air an episode that we actually posted last year about Halloween. And in that conversation, Dr. White and I discussed the very misunderstood cultural history tied to Halloween and how Christians might engage with it. And since this tends to be a continuous point of tension for Christians, we thought you might benefit from listening or perhaps re-listening to it. So we hope you enjoy it. All right, well, thanks for tuning in today, guys. I'm not sure when you'll be listening to this, but at the time of this recording, next week for us is Halloween. For most people, Halloween is what? An excuse to dress up in a costume, for kids to rack in on an insane amount of candy, or a reason to dust off an old horror film for the night, for a night's worth of adrenaline. And yet, Jim, it was interesting because you recently wrote a blog about a celebration that is happening around the same time this year, and that's the celebration of Diwali. And you noted how it's more than just the feasting and the festivities that most people are familiar with. I wonder if some of our listeners might have questions about whether that's similar to Halloween as well. So could you start off by talking about the origins of Halloween? Maybe just giving us a quick walk through its history?
It can't be quick.
Oh, okay. Well,
No, I mean, because so much of understanding all the cultural issues with Halloween, how Christians grapple with it and think about it, comes with really understanding its history and its background and getting a lot of misinformation out. So if you'll bear with me,
sure.
let me see if I can give this a little bit of a, the kind of walkthrough that it really deserves. Let me just begin by saying, I grew up culturally in a day when Halloween was just little more than, pumpkins and fall festivals and hay rides and dressing up as a pirate or a farmer to go trick or treating. Maybe a few innocent pranks like doorbelling. I don't know if you know that one, ringing a doorbell and running away and hiding in a bush while you watch someone go to the door and look around and nobody's there. We thought that was hilarious.
We still do that, Jim.
Oh, I know. People do. I know. But for me, that was like daring and adventure. Like you're going to get caught and something terrible is going to happen. Get a little older, you would sometimes soap a car.
I'm not familiar with that.
Bar of soap, and it doesn't come off real easy. You got to like wash it, but it's soap, so it doesn't hurt anything. And then I remember one year we went. You'd go out sometimes at Halloween, go cow tipping.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cow would be asleep, tip it over, and then the car hopping. The cars used to be parked all along the side of the street, and so on Halloween you'd get like 5 or 6 kids, and you go running, and you go run over the top of the car, then run over the top of the next car, all in front of all these neighbors sitting out on their front porch, and we thought that was so absolutely hilarious. Anyway, pretty tame stuff. But the history of Halloween goes back a ways. And while many think it is associated with paganism or largely associated with paganism, this is why I want to spend some time on this. It's actually overtly Christian. And the vast majority of its history has been deeply Christian or baptized by the Christian faith. And we're going to put a link or two in the show notes of some articles that might help people who want to go further on this. But the word itself refers to, and we call it Halloween, but it refers to All Hallows Eve or All Saints Eve, which was the day before All Hallows Day on November 1st. This was a Christian celebration of the lives of saints, both known saints and saints known only to God. Hallow in Old English means holy. It means sacred. And therefore, Hallows Eve or Halloween simply means the evening of holy persons and refers to the evening before All Saints' Day. All Saints' Day goes back to the 4th century. I mean, we're talking very ancient. Romans persecuted the Christians in increasing numbers prior to the conversion of Constantine, and Christians dedicated their own days to celebrate the martyrs and the saints they so admired. And that was the origin of All Saints' Day. Another layer of tradition is how the 12th and the 13th century, or during the 12th and 13th centuries, fall was called Harest, Haerest. I'm not a medieval linguist specialist, but I think it's Harest, but there wasn't a V in there. And now it's pronounced Harvest, which was a celebration of the taking in of crops. There was a celebration during that time of giving thanks to God for the harvest, and they would sing hymns, they would pray, and they would decorate. And they would decorate their churches with baskets of fruit and pumpkins and things like that. So you can see already, you already kind of probably connect some dots about a lot of what we do today. Harvest festivals were used to remind Christians of all the good things that God gives them. This is where some people, though, begin to read a pagan history into Halloween, specifically how the Celts would have festivals surrounding harvest times. They considered the fall a thin season, a thin time where the veil separating our world and the spirit world was a little more permeable and open. That allowed spirits in their thinking to pass through and damage their crops. So they would do things like set places at the dinner table to appease and welcome the spirits, or they would light bonfires to ward them off. And some would carve turnips or pumpkins as part of the festival to ward off spirits and stop fairies from entering their homes. This is where we get our traditions of some scary stories around this time of year, because the Celts would often tell the scary stories of the spirits of their little children. But it really became a Christian holiday, firmly entrenched by at least the 9th century, and even the ancient Celtic traditions after Patrick began converting Ireland were all baptized pretty significantly and were carried forward by Christians with great joy and celebration as a harvest festival to God. Fast forward another layer, October 31st also became known, another aspect of its Christian history, as Reformation Day. On October 31st, All Hallows Eve in 1517, the German monk Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses on the door of the All Saints Church in Wittenberg, which is right near the University of Wittenberg. If people don't know the significance of that, let me just go ahead and tell you real quick, just so that you understand another reason why this is so marked. The impetus behind the posting of Luther's 95 Theses was the sale of indulgences. An indulgence was the pardon that was granted by the Catholic Church of the punishment due to a person due to their already forgiven sins. And so, in essence, it borrowed from the storehouse of merit allowed by Jesus and the saints, or earned by Jesus and the saints. So the idea was that the head of the Catholic Church was in charge of the storehouse of kitchen passes. And in Luther's time, the granting of indulgences was really vulgarized and really commercialized, and by these professional pardon peddlers. And the one working Luther's corner of the world was a guy named Johannes Tetzel. And Tetzel pushed Luther over the edge. All you had to do was just pay a certain sum of money, and you would receive this full escape from any punishment from or while in purgatory. And no confession needed. You could even arrange to buy it for a friend already there. And it was just crass. Tetzel had a sales pitch that supposedly went, when a coin in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs. And posting a response on a church door was akin to posting something on a bulletin board or posting something on Facebook or Instagram or some type of Quora or Reddit thread. It was also relatively common for the day, a regular factor of university life, and the typical way of giving notice, like, say, you wanted to debate about this. The University of Wittenberg itself was a pretty obscure institution, a pretty small town of dirty streets and mud houses with straw roofs. It wasn't a particularly large commercial enterprise. So when Luther posted his 95 Theses, I'm getting to my point. When Luther posted his 95 Theses, there was no expectation surrounding its impact except maybe the prompting of a bit of local debate. Instead, a revolution was born that led to the Protestant Reformation and the upending of the political and ecclesiastical order throughout Europe. The reason, which I write about in my book, Hybrid Church, was very technological in nature. A few decades earlier, a new invention, the printing press, had come into play, and German printers sensed that Luther's broadside might just sell. So they put the 95 Theses into type, printed them and reproduced them. When they saw how rapidly they were selling, they made more copies and more copies and more copies, and it went, in our terminology, viral. His ideas just began to spread exponentially. We now feel like, historians feel like probably thousands upon thousands upon thousands of these things sold, of his 95 Theses. Anyway, it's considered the spark that lit the fire of the entire Protestant Reformation. And again, he did all that. Long story short, he posted them on October 31st, All Hallows Eve, in 1517, which is why Halloween is often also called Reformation Day. So you can see the rich spiritual heritage surrounding the marking of Halloween. And let me keep going. So then you have things like trick-or-treating and dressing up and trick-or-treating, which has its own backstory, which also is deeply Christian in nature. Trick-or-treating started in Ireland and Scotland and Wales back in the 16th century. People would go door to door in costumes, and they would ask for food in exchange for a poem or a song. But to really get a trick-or-treating, you have to go back even further than that to the 11th century, where the church had a tradition known as souling, S-O-U-L-I-N-G, souling. Children would go door to door and ask for soul cakes. Now, if you've never seen a soul cake, which goes way, way back, it's a sweet bun with a cross on it. So they would ask for soul cakes, and then in exchange for getting a soul cake, the children would pray for the souls of friends or relatives. And that's where costumes came in, because they would dress up as angels or saints, sometimes demons, and they would dress up, but then as an aspect of like a morality play and pray. The soul cakes themselves, as I said, were sweet with a cross marked on top, and when eaten, represented a soul being freed from purgatory. Well, as time went on, by the 19th century, souling had given way to something known as mumming, where children would offer songs and poetry, jokes, sometimes prayer, but maybe more poetry, jokes, now in exchange for fruit or money. By the Victorian period, costumes got even more outlandish and more elaborate. And you had a big onslaught during that time of Gothic literature. And so that was very popular in the culture. And so you had people dressing up as bats or something like that to go along with the Gothic literature, as well as Egyptian pharaohs. The phrase trick or treat actually was first used in Canada, or as an Office fan, Canada, but in Canada back in 1927. And it meant what it said: give a treat or you get tricked. But as a North American holiday, all things Halloween and trick-or-treating and all that really took off after the Second World War. And it really was focused around children at that time. And all these newly built suburbs made it safe and convenient for children to go roaming free and door to door. So while there were pagan festivals around the same dates that you can find in history and that Christians might have seized, it really became a Christian celebration. And it was a Christian celebration for almost all of its history, even though now, it's become so mainstream and secular in nature. And if people are concerned about the interplay between the Christian history of Halloween and the less than, Christian side of it that you can maybe find here and there, I mean, that's the story of every major celebration in our culture. I mean, many, if not most, of our Christian holy days were built on days that were already set apart in culture for various reasons that were not particularly nefarious. I mean, harvest is harvest. I mean, it is no matter who you are. Winter solstice is winter solstice, and on it goes. I mean, just think about Christmas. Christmas is a great example. We celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th. Find it for me in the Bible. It's not there. All we're told in terms of a specific date in the scriptures is that a census was going on. But that doesn't tell us much, because we know that the census took months as people left to make their way to the place of their birth. So we don't know when Joseph and Mary went to Bethlehem. We're also told, an intriguing little thing, that shepherds were out in their fields at night, which would typically be between the months of March and November. This has led some to think that this must not have been in the winter, that it had to be a summer birth, but that's not really true either, because winters in Judea were mild, so that doesn't mean it wasn't winter. So you can start parsing this like crazy to figure it out. And even if the conditions weren't particularly harsh, it still could have been in the winter months, because flocks were often kept during the winter months in order to be used for the temple sacrifices. I'm probably doing way more biblical background than anybody cares to know. But the truth is, we don't know the exact date of his birth. The Bible never tells us. And interestingly, his birth wasn't even celebrated at first by the early church. Only his death, burial, and resurrection. were actually remembered and celebrated by the early Christians. So why do we celebrate it on December 25th? Well, because the answer is tradition. It's a very long tradition going all the way back to the 4th century. The birth of Jesus was being celebrated by then, 4th century, and it was on December 25th. But here's where it has parallels to Halloween. The reason December 25th was chosen is because there was a celebration of gift giving already in place culturally. And Christians wanted to give gifts in honor of Jesus. That's because it coincided with another festival, a pagan Roman festival called Sol Invictus, which was Latin for the unconquerable sun, in honor of the pagan god Saturn. And it was celebrated on that day because it coincided with the winter solstice. So does that mean that the Christian celebration of Christmas has pagan roots, like something nefarious? No, a solstice is a natural, not a religious phenomenon, just like the Celtic celebration of the harvest. It was standard practice for ancient societies, including Israel, to set sacred days by the courses of the sun and the courses of the moon and the seasons. It was the most practical way to mark time. In Genesis, the first chapter, it says that God gave us the sun and the moon. One of the reasons was that people could mark out the sacred seasons. So since the Bible doesn't give us a specific date for the birth of Jesus, the early church likely chose December 25th for the celebration because it was an easy way for ordinary people to know when Christmas time was every year, and because it was a fitting time for symbolic reasons. The winter solstice is the moment when days of maximum darkness end, and the light becomes stronger from that point forward. Powerful imagery, powerful symbolism for the church and what the birth of Jesus meant and the coming of the light into the world. So not only was the birth of Christ celebrated on December 25th, but doing so made the point that the pagan ways had been conquered by the coming of God himself to reveal the true way. And that date has now been used for more than 1,800 years to remember his coming into the world. So in truth, like Christmas, the dominant stamp on the harvest season and Halloween is decisively Christian and has been for centuries. So I think that's a record for the longest answer I've ever given to a single question on this podcast by my dear Miss Alexis.
Oh, I don't know. We'll have our fact checkers look it up. We'll get back to you. No, but that was so worthwhile because there's so much that you just shared that I didn't know that I'm sure is not common knowledge. It actually cleared up something for me because a friend of mine from St. Louis, who you also know, she had told me that in her area, like when the kids go trick-or-treating, they have to tell a joke in order to get a piece of candy. And I'd never heard that before. And so, yeah, you just shared a little bit of context for that. So thank you. That's interesting. But yeah, that brings us to where we are now, at least in the West, where Halloween has become a huge cultural holiday. I had chuckled recently. I read this article posted recently in the New York Times, and it starts off by saying, on November 1st, 1876, the New York Times declared Halloween departed, destined for the grave. And then the next sentence says, perhaps it's time to eat some crow, because they note that customers are expected to spend $11.6 billion celebrating the holiday this year. I also read that more than 90% of North Americans plan to celebrate Halloween. And anecdotally, I'll just add that I've noticed over the last handful of years, the Halloween decorations, at least in my neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods, are just as elaborate as what we see at Christmas time. So
more, if not more.
Oh, yeah, if not more, for sure.
And my grandkids are absolutely just consumed with what they call blow-ups or inflatables. They like to get in the car and drive around neighborhoods and see them. And they just, yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Okay, so what is behind this surge in popularity then?
It's interesting. I read that New York Times article, and we'll put it in the show notes because it was interesting. But to put that into perspective, in 2005, we only spent a little over $3 billion. So we're talking about this thing has quadrupled in terms of consumer spending since then. So why so big? Well, contrary to what so many in the media say, I mean, you just read media articles. I was reading one this morning that just said, we're getting ready to celebrate this pagan festival. And then later on it says, well, now, it's like, well, it's a largely Christian one. But then later on it says, but now it's gotten more popular because it shed a lot of its Christian stuff. So it's like they talk out both sides of their mouth. Like at first they just say it's all pagan, and then later they acknowledge it's been Christian for 2,000 years. And anyway, let me see if I can unpack this. It's not a pagan festival that's almost exclusively pagan in its roots. I hope I've dispelled that myth. That's simply not true. But one of the reasons that it did take off was because it was a Christian day in a Christian culture with the Christian church 100% behind it and propagating it and having these festivals and having these parties and putting this in. That's what made it culturally over time something that was accepted and big. Another reason is because, as the New York Times article mentioned, it is a marketer's dream. If you think about it from a marketing standpoint, it falls on the same day every year. That's great. Easy to remember. The items for Halloween are largely consumable or they're one and done, meaning they have to be replaced. So that means we give candy, but we got to buy it again next year. We got to buy the candy next year. And we often need new costumes every year. Like you were telling me, okay, so your four kids are what this year?
We've got Anna, we have a skeleton, we have a pumpkin, and a hippopotamus.
Okay. I've got to see that hippopotamus. I hope that when Staff Kids comes through for their parade, I'll see the hippo. But that's another thing. People have no idea what I'm just mentioning. We have Staff Kids, a program for the staff, the children of our staff that work here, kind of a daycare type thing, but birth through age 5 and on. And so that here on our campus, and every year at around this time, they do a parade of costumes. And so maybe I'll get to see the hippo. Anyway, but let me. Okay, so here's my point. Is that what they were last year?
No.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons why this is a marketer's dream, because we're constantly growing out of them. Maybe the kids just get bigger; they can't wear the same outfit, or they want to change it every year. What's a hot costume changes? Adults want to change it every year. So again, marketer's dream. A third reason may seem like I'm talking on both sides of my mouth from what I said at the very beginning, that it was a Christian church, it was a Christian tradition that kind of got it accepted into culture. But one of the reasons why it's taken off even more of late is that while the Christian church made Halloween an acceptable day, when it became more secular, it broke out of the Christian confines and welcomed, or more people felt comfortable embracing it because it wasn't so overtly Christian, which made it even larger. A fourth reason is because it really is a fall celebration. It is a harvest celebration. It's a fall celebration. And we love the fall as a culture. I mean, the celebration of all things autumn is just a favorite time of the year. Apple picking and fires in the fireplace and getting out your sweaters and changing of the temperatures. I mean, it also starts that stretch. It's like it's the unofficial start to that stretch that goes through Thanksgiving and December and Christmas. And that's just our favorite stretch of the year. And so you have Halloween on one end and Christmas on the other that are bookends, the most cherished 3 months in season, arguably, for most people. And finally, Halloween has gotten big because it has broken away from being merely a children's event. It is now for adults. And about 3/4 of all adults will engage, celebrate, participate in Halloween in some way, the vast, vast majority.
It's interesting then that not everyone is thrilled about this growing trend of Halloween. In fact, many churches have taken the lead in intentionally offering alternatives to some of the traditional ways of celebrating Halloween, including things like trunk or treats and fall festivals and so on. Can you share a little bit about that posture that many churches have towards Halloween?
Yeah, I'm really surprised that with some, not most, but with some, there's like this knee-jerk reaction. Oh, this is a pagan occultic thing. It's not. It's not. I mean, that would almost be looking for the minority report on Halloween and not the majority report, certainly in the West. So, but I don't know whether it's because they don't know about its rich Christian history or because they don't like how it no longer reflects it. But I do find that there is a need for some churches to try and put Halloween down. But what's interesting is what they offer in its place is no different. It's no different. For example, they might be against trick-or-treating, costumes, and marking the day as if somehow that's bad. Trick-or-treating, wearing a costume, and marking Halloween, October 31st. But then they have a trunk or treat in its place where the kids dress up on Halloween and get candy. It's like, it's so disingenuous, It's just like, what stand are you taking? What cultural, I don't get it. I don't get it. It's absolutely no different. But if you haven't been to one of these, a trunk or treat, it's when kids dress up and they go to decorated cars in a church parking lot, and the trunks are filled with candy, and people are at the trunks giving kids candy as they come by, and as they say, trick or treat. It's just the same thing, only it's in a parking lot and not as much fun. so it's kind of hypocritical to say you're against Halloween for some reason and then do something like that. Or on Halloween, no less. And even if you say, well, we don't do it on Halloween. Okay, so why do you always do it the 30th or the 29th? I mean, you're buying into the cult. I mean, come on. Now, other churches will have big fall festivals, which often involve costumes and candy and hay rides and pumpkins and everything we've been talking about historically. But again, to me, I'm not sure what they think they're accomplishing if you're saying we're doing this as an alternative. If you want to be against Halloween for some reason, all you're doing is copying it on church property. If you're wanting to add more Christian heft to it, I don't see that happening with fall festivals. I don't see that happening with trunk or treats. They're not exactly celebrating any saints that I'm aware of. They're not offering prayers for the candy. Now some dismiss Halloween entirely. They don't engage it. They shut down their lights and lock the doors on Halloween. But again, I think that's making it a purely pagan holiday historically, which historically it is not. It is a Christian one. You don't have to engage in how people are messing with it, perverting it, or taking it down. But you're not exactly. I mean, you could be part of its continued rich history.
Yeah. Well, Christians do, though, have a reason to be concerned about Halloween. In fact, you've blogged before that it's not so much the appearance of occultic aspects, or the point you just made, not because of its pagan roots. That's not why you've said before that we should have a little bit of caution. So what is it? Can you repeat that for our listeners?
Yeah, I still hold to the childlike fun of the night. But the day itself may not be as innocent, particularly in the hands of adults. And it's not because of the occult; it's because of the sex. I read an article in the New York Times that maybe we can dig up and put in the show notes because it's been a few years. But it was called "Good Girls Gone Bad for a Day." I remember the title: "Good Girls Good Girls Go Bad for a Day." And it was written by a reporter who talked about the changing nature of women's Halloween costumes over the years. And Little Red Riding Hood, in her thigh highs and miniskirt, does not seem en route to her grandmother's house. Goldilocks in a snug platform heels and bodice gives the impression that she's been sleeping in everybody's bed. The little witch wearing little more than a Laker girl uniform, and a fairy who appears to shop at Victoria's Secret. A cowgirl with a skirt the size of, you get the point. The images are more strip club than storybook. And so, and I don't know if you've seen this, but you'll go to some Halloween stores, some costume stores, and I've seen this personally, where there's a sign out front that says no one under 18 allowed without a parent. Mm-hmm. That's not because kids go crazy. That's because it is not safe for their eyes. It's not kids in Halloween that are the problem. Sometimes it's the adults. I think Halloween, as far as kids go, can still be something innocent, but I would say a word to any and all adults who've made it dress like a porn star and act like one night. I think they're the ones that are often making it dark.
Well, I think that brings us intuitively then to my last question, which is that should Christians participate? Or I guess, do you have any wisdom behind how they might participate?
Well, I've alluded to this already, and you have too. We both participate in Halloween. I did with my kids. I do with my grandkids. We've got fun inflatables on our front lawn. Nothing scary, all preschool kind of fun stuff. And we get all into it, and we enjoy it, and we celebrate it, and we also remember all that it holds from a Christian perspective, and gratitude for the harvest, and so many other things, and just the rich history of saints. And anyway, everything we've talked about. I think Halloween as an American cultural event for kids is no big deal. Dress them up as one of the minions, have some fun. Or this year, one of the emotions. I think the top 3 or 4 of the top 10 Costumes is one of the emotions from Inside Out, Disney's or Pixar. It's just not a big deal from, a paranormal or pagan or occultic perspective on things. This is an area where I think people are cherry picking their history, they're majoring on the minors, and it's just really not there. If anything, its roots are decisively Christian. The church has been celebrating All Hallows Eve and the time of the harvest since its beginning. So I would say buy some candy, let the doorbell be rung, and enjoy. If you're a parent, there's another reason to celebrate Halloween. For a Christian parent to celebrate it wholeheartedly and give all glory to the living God. And here's the reason. 79% of all parents admit to secretly eating some of the candy their children bring home. Yay, God.
I'm not embarrassed to admit that I do not secretly eat my children's candy. I ask them to fork it over on a regular basis.
There you go.
Well, thank you. I'm surprised that we hadn't tackled this topic already, so I'm glad that we made room to do that today. Just real quick, we don't do this every week, but just in case we have some new listeners, I'm going to remind you of a couple of things before we log off. So, if you ever want to submit a question, you have a topic that you think would be great for us to talk about that we haven't tackled already, or maybe from a different perspective, you can do that at churchandculture.org. If you click podcasts and scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see an area there where you can ask your question. You heard Jim allude several times to the show notes, where we include a ton of helpful resources and books and links to articles and past episodes that will help you dig deeper into what we're talking about today. So if that would serve you, again, just go to churchandculture.org and you can find the show notes that correspond to every episode. And then finally, we have a lot of listeners who prefer to watch the podcast on YouTube. So if you didn't know that was the option that was available to you, but you would like to check that out, we hope you will. So that's just on YouTube. You can search for Church and Culture. Okay, I think that covers it. Again, thank you. And I hope you guys have a really great, fun, and safe Halloween.